Hello, East Garner Elementary Explorers. Miss Buckner here. Looking forward to sharing some information with you about Louis Armstrong. He was an amazing musical artist, and his story is inspiring, and I think you will really enjoy learning a little bit more about him today. Louis Armstrong was a leading trumpeter and one of the most influential artists in jazz history. Armstrong carried the nicknames Satchmo, short for Satchel Mouth, Pops, and later Ambassador Satch. Armstrong was a native of New Orleans, Louisiana. He came to prominence in the 1920s, influencing countless musicians with both his daring trumpet style and unique vocals. Armstrong's charismatic stage presence impressed not only the jazz world, but all of popular music and became one of the first great celebrities of the 20th century. Louis Armstrong was born in New Orleans in 1901. He was raised by his mother in a neighborhood so dangerous it was called the battlefield. Young Louis spent much of his boyhood in the care of his grandmother, but he also found a second home among the Karnofskis, a local Lithuanian Jewish family who hired him to do odd jobs for their peddling business. They treated him as though he were their own child, often giving him food and even loaning him money to buy his first instrument, a $5 cornet. He wouldn't begin playing the trumpet until 1926. Armstrong spent his youth singing on the street for spare change, but he didn't receive any formal musical training until age 11, when he spent 18 months in a juvenile detention facility. He spent his sentence learning how to play the bugle and cornet from the facility's music teacher, and eventually became a star performer in its brass band. Armstrong continued honing his skills in New Orleans honky-tonks, and after his release in 1919, he landed a breakthrough gig on a riverboat with a band there. Armstrong stated, "I do believe that my whole success goes back to that time when I was arrested as a wayward boy, because then I had to quit running around and began to learn something. Most of all, I began to learn music." After leaving New Orleans in 1922, Armstrong spent 3 years playing in jazz ensembles in Chicago and Harlem. His second wife, a pianist named Lil Hardin, believed he was too talented not to have his own band. In 1925, while Armstrong was performing in New York, she signed a deal with Chicago's Dreamland Cafe behind his back to make him a featured act. He was billed as the world's greatest trumpet player, and it turned out to be the best move of his career. Only a few days after he arrived back in Chicago, OK Records allowed him to make his first recordings under his own name. Between 1925 and 1928, he and his backup bands, the Hot Five and the Hot Seven, went on to cut several dozen records that introduced the world to his improvisational trumpet solos and trademark scat singing. The OK recordings would later play a key role in establishing Armstrong as a legendary jazz figure. Louis Armstrong's achievements are remarkable. During his career, he recorded hit songs for 5 decades, that's 50 years, and his music is still heard today on television and radio and in films. He wrote 2 autobiographies, more than 10 magazine articles, hundreds of pages of memoirs, and thousands of letters. He appeared in more than 30 films, over 20 of them were full-length feature films, and was a gifted actor with superb comic timing. Composed dozens of songs that became jazz standards, and he performed an average of 300 concerts each year, with his frequent tours to all parts of the world earning his nickname, Ambassador Satch. Armstrong was already known as Ambassador Satch for his concerts in far-flung corners of the globe. But in 1960, he became an official cultural diplomat after he took on a 3-month State Department-sponsored trip across Africa. The trumpeter and his band, the All-Stars, proceeded to take the continent by storm. And one of the most remarkable signs of Armstrong's popularity came during a stopover in the Congo's Katanga province, where two sides of a secession were feuding, and there was a crisis, but they called a one-day truce so they all could watch him play. And he would later joke that he had stopped a civil war. In late 1963, Armstrong and his All-Stars band recorded the title track for an upcoming musical called Hello, Dolly. When the show debuted on Broadway the following year, it became a runaway hit, and by May, Hello, Dolly had soared to the top of the Billboard charts, displacing 2 songs by the Beatles, who were then at the height of their popularity. So at age 62, Louis Armstrong became the oldest musician in American history to have a #1 song. Armstrong is widely remembered for his rosy ballad, What a Wonderful World, when he recorded it in 1967, just 4 years before his death. But while the song performed well overseas, it did not get promoted well in the United States, and it flopped. What a Wonderful World didn't make a comeback until 1987, when it was included in the soundtrack of the Robin Williams film Good Morning Vietnam. And it was then reissued, and it shot to number 33 on the Billboard charts, and since then, it's become one of Armstrong's signature tunes. Louis Armstrong was arguably the greatest artist of the 20th century, and he was also one of its greatest eaters. The man behind his song Struttin' with Some Barbecue so often had food on his mind that he worked it into his song lyrics and occasionally signed his letters Soul Foodly Yours, but more often the sign-off was Red Beans and Ricely Yours, after his favorite food, a New Orleans staple. And I've included his family recipe here in this slide. Through the years, Louis entertained millions, from heads of state and royalty to the kids on his stoop in his Queens, New York neighborhood. Despite his fame, he remained a humble man and lived a simple life in a working-class neighborhood. By the time of Armstrong's death in 1971, the man known around the world as Satchmo was widely recognized as a founding father of jazz, a uniquely American form of art. His influence as an artist and cultural icon is universal, unmatched, and very much alive today. I hope you all enjoyed learning more about Louis Armstrong and found it as inspirational as I did.